But when we celebrated last night, did we usher in 2010 or 2010? And what decade did we just say goodbye to, the zeros? It's a tough call. So KXLY4's McKay Allen did some investigative reporting for us today. McKay, what's the consensus?
Well, the consensus was there was no consensus on this historic issue, and our utterly unscientific poll didn't produce many results, but we did have some interesting responses.
So what should the last decade be called?
Seriously screwed up.
Glad it's over.
Some had firm ideas of what to call the first decade of the new millennium, the decade that ended yesterday. There's the obvious.
The 2000s.
The descriptive.
The Twitter decade.
Decade of excellence for the Gonzaga basketball team.
The energy drink decade.
And then there's people that have no idea what to call it.
Man, that's a hard one.
This guy, for example.
Because you got the O's, the aughts. I don't know. What do you think? It's not as easy as the 80s and the 90s.
No, it definitely isn't. I don't even know if I have an answer.
He didn't answer. Ever. What about the upcoming decade, the decade that started today?
Hopefully it's not going to be the continuing Middle East war decade.
The get out of debt decade?
I'm having a baby this year, so...
The decade of a baby?
Yeah. Decade of a baby.
Then there was the response that sort of summed everything up, old decade and new. Whatever you call them.
Once again, it's a decade of adjustment. We've gone through a period of excess, and now we're adjusting to a more reasonable lifestyle and one of hopefully physical responsibility and personal restraint.
Now, my guess for the decade we just exited may be the first decade or the 2000s. As for the decade we're entering as of today, my guess is in the history books in the future it'll be the teens, perhaps.